The cold had been inside Varnath for 11 years, not the ordinary cold of a northern winter, not the kind that settles into stone walls and breath clouds and sends people reaching for extra wool. This was the other kind, the kind that had a mind, the kind that did not lift at dawn, did not ease in the afternoon, did not care what season the calendar claimed. The kind that killed crops and silenced rivers and left the wolves of the kingdom pacing their territories in tight, anxious circles, their yellow eyes bright with something close to grief. We called it the Salmir curse because it had a source, a relic sealed in the old sanctum at the kingdom's far edge, a relic that had been bound shut by a dying sorcerer 11 years ago when he decided that if he could not have Varnath, no one would. He was dead now. The curse was not. I had sent warriors in the first year. 12 of them, strong men with wolf blood and iron in their hands, and they came back with nothing to show for it but scorched palms and eyes that didn't quite focus right for several days afterward. In the third year I went myself and was thrown from the sanctum's threshold so hard I left a dent in the stone floor I was landing on. In the fifth year I assembled a company of 100, the finest wolf warriors in the northern territories, men who had fought real wars and not flinched, men whose wolves were old and deep and sure. One by one they approached the relic and returned back. I was running out of men. I was running out of years. The kingdom was running out of patience with a king who kept trying the same approach and expecting a different result. In the 11th year, I assembled what was left of the original 143 who still had the stomach for it, and I told them we were going again. I did not tell them I believed it would work this time. I was not certain I believed it myself, but a king who stops moving gives his people permission to stop hoping, and I was not ready to give Varnath that. We were 3 days out of the capital when I noticed the woman. She was at the back of the column, moving between the wounded. 2 men had taken injuries in a skirmish the night before, nothing fatal but ugly, with the kind of competence that doesn't announce itself. She had a kit across her back, and a manner that suggested she had been tending the injured her whole life and saw no particular drama in it. She was not dressed for a military march. She was dressed for a village in autumn, wool practical boots, her dark hair tied back with the kind of carelessness that means a person has too many actual things to do to spend time thinking about their hair. I pulled my horse back to where she was walking and looked down at her. "Who are you?" I said. She didn't stop walking. She finished wrapping a man's wrist before she looked up. "Sable," she said. "I'm a herbalist, or I was apprenticed to one. She died last winter." I didn't authorize a herbalist. "No," she agreed, as though this were a mild administrative irregularity and not a problem. "But Fen lost 2 fingers in that skirmish and your men don't have anyone with the right supplies, so." She tilted her head at the man beside her, who was looking at his freshly bandaged hand with the expression of someone who had not expected to still have 3 working fingers. I looked at her for a moment. "This isn't a supply march," I said. "Where we're going is dangerous." "I know where you're going," she said. "Everyone in Varnath knows where you're going." 11 years of curse winter tends to make people follow the news. I told myself I was leaving her at the next village. I told myself this for 2 more days without doing anything about it, because her hands were too useful and my men kept getting minor injuries that she sorted out before they became major ones. And also, I noticed this only reluctantly, because the column was quieter when she was in it. Not in a way I could explain, just quieter. The wolves stopped pacing at night when she made camp near them. The tension that had been building for 3 days, the kind that precedes a battle or a hard door, eased by a fraction each time she moved through the men. I told myself I was imagining it. I watched her anyway. There is something I should tell you about the Salmir curse, about what it had done to me specifically in 11 years of fighting it. I had not always been the kind of man who marches in silence and speaks in commands. I had a memory, faint now, like a room I used to live in that has since been closed up and the furniture covered, of being different, warmer. My father used to say I laughed too easily for a king's heir, which he meant as criticism, and which I took as evidence that he was not paying attention to what laughter was for. That man had not made the trip to Salmir and back, over and over, losing men and failing and returning to a kingdom that was slowly going gray at the edges. What came back each time was something harder and quieter and more efficient. I was good at the work of being king. I was less and less certain I was still good at the work of being anything else. My wolf, the deep, instinctive part of me that ran beneath the surface of thought, had gone very still in recent years. Not absent. Just waiting, the way a wolf waits when it has found the place where its prey will eventually come and has nothing to do now but be patient. I did not know what it was waiting for. I had stopped asking. On the second night, I could not sleep, which was not unusual. I got up and walked the perimeter of the camp in the dark, which was also not unusual. What was unusual was that I found Sable awake, sitting near the company's wolves. There were 9 of them, the companion wolves who ran with the pack and had been restless for weeks, and the wolves were lying in a loose circle around her with their heads on their paws. She was not doing anything in particular. She had a small cloth in her hands and was folding it, the way people fold things when they need something to do with their hands, and she was not talking to the wolves or performing any particular soothing action. She was simply sitting there, and the wolves, who had been pacing themselves thin for 11 years of curse winter, were asleep. I stood at the edge of the firelight and watched this for longer than I should have. She looked up. The firelight was low, but she found me anyway, which meant her eyes were good in the dark, or she had heard me coming from further away than I'd thought. She didn't seem startled. "Can't sleep either," she said. It was not a question. "I don't sleep much," I said. She looked at the wolves, then back at me. "How long has it been like that?" "Like what?" "Like whatever is making you sound like you haven't rested in years." I did not answer immediately. It was the kind of question that required either a very short answer or a very honest one, and I was out of practice with the honest kind. 11 years, I said at last. "Give or take," she nodded as though this were the answer she'd expected. "Since the curse. Since the first trip to Salmir." She was quiet for a moment. One of the wolves stirred, sighed heavily, and pushed its gray head a little closer to her knee without waking up. She reached down and set her hand on its flank without looking, an automatic gesture, like settling a child's blanket. "What does it feel like?" she said. "The relic." "When you try." I thought about the appropriate answer, which was that it was none of her business, and then I thought about the accurate answer, and I said the accurate one instead. "Like standing at a door that knows it isn't yours," I said. "There's no violence to it. It doesn't fight you. It just doesn't open. Like you could stand there for the rest of your life and it would simply wait for you to realize you're in the wrong place." She absorbed this. The fire crackled. The wolves breathed in their low, sleeping rhythm. "That's an interesting way to put it," she said. "Have you a better one?" "I don't know," she said, honest and unbothered. "I've never tried a cursed relic. I've never tried any relic. I'm a herbalist." She paused. "I was a herbalist's apprentice. Now I suppose I'm just a herbalist who is following an army to a ruined sanctum for reasons that seemed reasonable 3 days ago. And now," she tilted her head, "still reasonable, just colder than I expected." I went back to my tent. I lay on my back in the dark for a long time, listening to the camp breathe. My wolf, which had been still and patient in its deep place for years, was doing something I hadn't felt in a long time. It was paying attention, not hunting, not restless, just alert. The way a wolf is alert when something has changed in the air, and it hasn't worked out what yet, but it knows, with the certainty of old instinct, that the change is significant. I told myself it was the approach of Salmir, the proximity of the relic. Something in the land shifting as we drew close to the source of the curse. I told myself this for the rest of the night, knowing I was lying. The third day was harder. The curse winter tightened as we moved into Salmir's territory. The cold sharpened, the gray deepened. The trees thinned out into the kind of bare winterwood that looks less like nature and more like a decision. The wolves ranged close to the company's heels and didn't stray. The men moved in quiet, the old soldier's discipline of saving breath and sound for when it matters. Sable moved with them. She did not ask for a horse. She did not complain about the pace or the cold, though she was not dressed for either. Mid-morning I sent a man back with a spare cloak, one of the heavier riding ones, and she put it on without comment or excessive gratitude, just a nod that said, "Useful, thank you. Now I can keep moving." I told myself I noticed this because efficiency matters in a company. I told myself this 2 or 3 times. Around midday, one of the men, Perk, a veteran of the fourth Salmir attempt, a man who had been thrown from the sanctum threshold with enough force to break his collarbone, fell back to walk beside her. I was near enough to hear snatches of what they said. He was asking her about her village, about the Winter's effect there, about her teacher, the herbalist. She was answering in the same quiet, direct way she did everything. "Not afraid?" he asked at one point. "Of where we're headed?" "I'm afraid of the curse getting worse," she said. "Salmir seems like the shorter problem." He laughed, which was the first time I had heard Perk laugh in about 4 years. I turned away before he could see me listening. There is a thing that happens to soldiers who have been at a hard thing for a long time, not a broken thing, not defeat, something subtler. A kind of narrowing. The world compresses down to the task, and the men and the cold and the next step, and everything outside that radius begins to seem like another country, one you remember vaguely but have no present tense access to. I had been in that compressed world for 11 years. I had forgotten it was compressed. I had begun to think this was simply what the world was, small and gray and purposeful and cold. She was from the other country. She had brought it with her into the column, and it was not fitting neatly back into the compressed shape of things. It kept catching me off guard, the sight of Perk laughing, the wolves asleep at her feet, the man with 3 fingers looking at his bandaged hand as though something good had just happened. My wolf was not still anymore. It was not exactly restless either. It was doing something I did not have a word for. It was oriented. The way a compass needle is oriented. Pointing. I had led this company to Salmir more times than I could justify with good military logic. I had never felt the needle point. We reached the sanctum at dusk on the 3rd day. It was smaller than I remembered, or rather the ruins around it had grown more ruinous, and the remaining structure had stopped pretending to be impressive. 3 walls still stood. The 4th had come down some years ago, the Winter's work, frost expanding in the old mortar until the stone gave, and through the gap you could see the inner chamber, and in the inner chamber on the stone platform that had been built for it centuries ago, the relic. It did not look like much. A gray stone disc, perhaps the size of a man's spread hand, set in a cradle of old iron. The iron had gone black. The stone itself had a faint pulse to it, not light exactly, more a kind of density, the sense that something inside it was breathing very slowly. My men stood at the threshold. No one moved for a moment. "Same order as last time," said my second Veth, who had been on 5 of these attempts and knew the rhythm of the failure. "Same order," I said. "He went first, because a second always goes first if he has a good commander and doesn't want his commander taking unnecessary risks." He crossed the sanctum floor. The stone was thick with frost, and reached the platform and laid his hand on the relic. The relic did nothing. Veth stood there for a moment, like a man knocking at a door in an empty house. Then the relic's pulse shifted slightly, not violent, not aggressive, simply a kind of refusal so complete it had no need to be harsh about it, and Veth stepped back, his hand at his side, and walked to the edge of the chamber and stood there. One by one the men went. I counted. Every man in the company, one after the other, and every man walked back with nothing to show for it but the same expression. Not defeat exactly, more a kind of bewilderment, like being told something that doesn't make sense but is clearly true. I went last. I always went last. The frost on the sanctum floor cracked under my boots. The relic's pulse was the same as it had always been, slow, breathing, waiting. I laid my hand on the gray stone disc and felt the familiar sensation, the door that was not mine, the waiting that had nothing to do with force, the knowledge, simple and absolute, that I could stand here for another 11 years and this would not change. I took my hand back. I stood there in the ruined chamber with 43 men watching me, in a sanctum with 3 walls and 1 gap, in a kingdom that had been dying for 11 years, and I thought, we have come to the end of what I know how to do. And then Sable stepped through the gap in the wall. She had been outside. I had half noticed her there, standing in the gap where the fourth wall had been, watching the men go one at a time. I had not told her to stay outside. I had not told her to come either, but she had come this far and it had seemed beside the point to argue. She was not a warrior. She had no wolf blood that I knew of. She was the least likely person in the company to crack an 11-year curse. She came through the gap in the wall and walked across the frost-cracked floor, and she did it the way she did everything, without particular drama, without announcing herself, with the same quiet directness she had shown when she wrapped Finn's wrist 3 days ago. She reached the platform. She looked at the relic for a moment. Not with awe, not with calculation. Just looking at it the way she looked at everything, steadily, without flinching. She laid her hand on it. The relic woke. There is no other word for it. Not cracked, not shattered, not exploded, woke. The gray stone went warm gold from the inside, slowly at first, like a coal that has been banked under ash for a long time and now someone has breathed on it. The iron cradle vibrated once, a single low tone that moved through the stone floor and up through the soles of my boots and into my chest and stayed there. The pulse I had always felt from the relic, slow, patient, waiting, doubled, tripled, became something else entirely, a recognition. The particular quality of something that has been waiting for a very long time and has just been given what it was waiting for. The curse winter broke. I did not see it happen outside. I heard it. Or rather, I heard the absence of it, the silence that falls when a sound that has been running so long you have stopped hearing it suddenly stops. 11 years of curse winter pressure, the low constant weight of it on the land, gone in a single heartbeat. Through the gap in the wall I could see, even in the dusk, even in the failing light, the color coming back into the sky, the gray lifting like a curtain being drawn, the first real dark of an ordinary winter night rather than the endless gray pall we had been living under. The wolves outside, the 9 who had been pacing their thin circuits for years, lifted their heads together and howled. Not in distress, in something I had not heard in 11 years and nearly did not recognize. Relief. Sable's hand was still on the relic. The gold light was pooling around her wrist now, settling there, becoming specific. I crossed the sanctum floor before I understood I was moving. The mate mark appeared on her wrist like something that had always been there and had simply been waiting for the right light to show itself. Not burning, not violent, warm. A warm gold impression on her skin in the shape that the mate bond makes when it names itself. I had seen the mark in old texts. I had never seen it in the living world, had never expected to see it, had spent 11 years too busy trying to save Varnath to give any thought to the question of a fated mate. She was looking at her wrist when I reached her. She did not look frightened. She looked the way she had looked at everything else on this march. Steady. Trying to understand something accurately. "What is this?" she said. It was not quite a question. "The mate mark," I said. She looked up at me. "Yours, mine," I said, and then, because she had a right to the honest answer, "and yours." She held my eyes for a moment. 43 men were standing in a ruined sanctum around us. The gold light of the relic was still pulsing, quieter now, satisfied. The wolves outside were still calling to each other in the ordinary language of wolves who have just been freed from something. "I didn't know," she said. "Neither did I," said. "Until this march, until the second day." Something moved behind her eyes, not surprise exactly, more recognition. "The kind that tells you a thing you already half knew. The wolves at night," she said. "Yes. And the cold getting easier." "Yes." She looked down at the mark on her wrist again. The gold had steadied into something that looked permanent, the way a brand does, but without the violence of one, more like ink settling into skin, like a signature finding its page. "I'm a herbalist," she said, almost to herself. "I was following the army to tend the wounded." "I know," I said. "I'm not." She stopped, started again. "I don't have any particular standing." "You have mine," I said, "if you want it." She looked at me then, not at the mark, not at the sanctum, at me. I was aware that I had not been looked at like this in a long time, not evaluated, not measured, not feared, just seen. The way she had looked at Perk when he laughed, the way she had looked at the wolf when it settled its head against her knee, directly, without performance, with the attention of someone who is genuinely interested in what is in front of them and not in what it can do for them. "Tell me about the bond," she said. "The mate bond. Tell me what it means." So I told her. Standing in the ruined sanctum with the curse broken around us and 43 witnesses and the gold light slowing to a comfortable warmth, I told her everything I knew about the mate bond. What it was, what it asked of both people, what it did not demand. I told her it was a fated thing, not a forced one. I told her that the mark on her wrist was a recognition, not an order. I told her she was free to take her time with it and that I was asking, not commanding, asking for the chance to show her what it was. She listened the way she did everything, steadily, without interrupting, taking in the actual information rather than the weight of the moment. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. "You said it felt like a door," she said at last. "The relic, standing at a door that knows it isn't yours." "Yes." "And then I walked in." "Yes." A faint smile crossed her face. Not triumphant. Something quieter than that. "I've spent my whole life walking into places I wasn't invited," she said. "It's always worked out better than waiting." Veth cleared his throat from somewhere behind me. I had forgotten about Veth. I had for the first time in 11 years forgotten about the company. "My lord," he said. His voice was very careful, the voice of a man who is managing several things at once. "The sky is clear." "I know," I said. "First clear sky since the 8th year." "I know, Veth, the men are," he paused. "They're taking it well, given that the herbalist just," he paused again. "You know, broke the thing none of us could break." I looked at Sable. She was looking at Veth with her usual directness. "I didn't know I was going to," she said to him, straightforward. "I just stepped forward because everyone else had stepped back." Veth looked at her for a moment. Then he looked at me. Then he looked at the mark on her wrist, which was visible because the cloak I'd sent back had fallen open. His face went through several things in quick succession. "Chem," he said, and stepped back very deliberately to give us room. We made camp in the old village at the sanctum's edge, 3 houses still standing, most of the rest fallen but usable as windbreaks. The night was cold in the ordinary way. The wolf blood kind, the kind you can put a fire against and win. The men built their fires with more energy than I had seen from them in years, the particular industry of people who have been released from something, and are not sure yet what to do with the release. Sable sat with me at the fire nearest the largest remaining house. She had not retreated from what had happened in the sanctum. She was not performing easiness either. She was simply present, which was, I was beginning to understand, her natural state. "Ask your questions," I said. "I have a lot of them," she said. "I know. Is it always like this, the mate bond? Does it come with a relic, or is that unusual?" "That was unusual," I said. "The relic recognized you because you're my mate. The bond uses whatever is available. In this case, what was available was an 11-year-old curse and a sanctum." "Economical," she said. "The bond is very economical." She folded her hands around her mug. The fire put warm light on the side of her face. The mate mark on her wrist caught the light and held it, gold against the firelight's orange, and I had to look away from it because it was doing something to my chest that I was not ready to examine in public. "What happens now?" she said. "Practically, you are the Alpha King of Varnath. I'm the woman who followed your army from a village. What happens now?" "What happens now," I said, "is that we march back to Varnath. The curse is broken and the kingdom needs to know. When we arrive, I would like to present you as my mate formally before the court, if you're willing, and if I need time, then we take time," she nodded slowly. "You said you felt it on the 2nd day." "Yes. I felt something on the 1st day," she said, as though confessing to something minor. "I thought it was, I didn't know what it was. Something about the way the wolves settled, something about the air near you." She paused. "I thought I was imagining it because you are a very significant person to follow quietly at the back of a column, and I thought my mind was making things up." I looked at her. "You thought you were making it up. You're the Alpha King," she said, straightforward. "I'm a herbalist. Arithmetic suggested I was imagining things. The arithmetic was wrong." "The arithmetic was wrong," she agreed. And then, very quietly, "I'm glad." The fire settled. The wolves at the edge of camp, who had been ranging freely tonight, the first night in years they had moved without that anxious tight-circuit pacing, came back one by one to lie around the fire. The gray one, the one who had slept against Sable's knee 2 nights ago, came directly to her again and put its heavy head on her knee with the absolute confidence of an animal who knows where it belongs. She put her hand on its flank. I watched her hand settle on the wolf's gray fur. I watched the wolf breathe out a long, slow breath and relax completely. I thought about the door that knows it isn't yours, and about 11 years of standing in front of it, and about the way it had felt when the relic woke, not like a victory, not like a battle one, but like a door opening the way a door opens when someone who belongs on the other side finally arrives. I had been marching toward Salmir for 11 years. I had thought I was marching toward the relic. I understood now that I had been marching toward the back of the column, where a woman with steady hands and no particular sense of her own significance was tending the wounded and setting the wolves at ease and walking into places she wasn't invited because she had spent her whole life finding that it worked out. The march back took 4 days instead of 3. We moved more slowly, partly because the curse winter's ending had turned the ground soft in ways we hadn't anticipated, actual weather returning, actual seasons, ice melting on the roads, and partly because I was in no particular hurry. This was new. I had been in a hurry for 11 years. Sable and I walked portions of the march together. Not the whole thing. She moved through the company as she always had, tending whoever needed tending. But for hours at a time she walked beside my horse and we talked, or didn't talk, with equal comfort. I learned things about her, that she had grown up in 3 different villages because her mother had followed work and her father had been absent, that she had apprenticed to the old herbalist at 14 and had been with her until last winter, that she had no particular ambitions beyond being useful and no particular fears beyond wasting the life she'd been given. "You want things," I said once, "beyond the immediate useful thing in front of you." She thought about this seriously. "I want the curse winter to end," she said. "I've wanted that for 11 years, same as everyone. I want people's crops to grow. I want Varnath to breathe again." A pause. She stopped, and for the first time I saw something that was not quite composure, something gentler and less guarded. "I want to know what the kingdom looks like in summer. I've heard it's very green." "It is," I said. "It's very green." "Then I want that," she said, simply, as though wanting the entire kingdom to be green again in summer was the most ordinary desire in the world. I thought about what Perk had said to me on the second evening, quiet at the edge of camp while Sable was still at the fire. "She's not afraid of anything, is she?" "Not the things that usually frighten people," I'd said. "What does frighten her?" I had thought about it. "I think she's afraid of being useless," I said. "I think she's afraid of missing the thing she's supposed to do." Perk had looked at me for a long moment. "She didn't miss it," he said. "No, she had not missed it. We came into the capital on the 4th day in the late afternoon. The news had run ahead of us. It always does in wolf kingdoms. The message moves faster than the march, and the city had the quality of a place that has been holding its breath for 11 years and has just slowly, cautiously begun to let it out. People were in the streets. Not celebrating yet. The relief was too new and too large for celebration. The way that very good news sometimes needs a day to become real, but present, watching us come in, their faces doing things I hadn't seen on my people's faces in a long time. I was aware of the company at my back, 43 men who had failed at this more times than any of them cared to count, coming home having succeeded not because they had gotten stronger or smarter or better, but because a herbalist's apprentice from a village they'd never heard of had stepped forward in a ruined sanctum and laid her hand on a piece of old stone. I was aware of Sable, riding now. I had given her a horse 2 days ago, and she had learned it with the same quiet competence she brought to everything, on my right. She was watching the city with the expression of someone taking in a great deal of information and filing it carefully. She had not been to the capital before. She was not performing wonder. She was simply looking. The court was assembled in the great hall. Of course it was, word had reached them, and the court of Varnath had been waiting for the curse to break since the 1st year. They were not going to miss the return of the king who had broken it. I brought Sable in with me. This was, as I was aware, the kind of action that speaks before you say anything. I did not bring her in as a guest or as a company member or with any particular ceremony. I simply brought her in as I would bring in someone who belonged at my side, which she did, and let the court make what it would of that. What the court made of it was approximately 4 seconds of silence, then a murmur that ran the length of the hall like a current. I raised my hand. The murmur stopped. "The curse is broken," I said. "The Salmir relic has been unbound. Varnath will have its seasons back." The hall reacted to this with the sound that a hall makes when a weight it has been carrying for 11 years is lifted off its collective chest. I waited for the sound to settle. "I am also presenting before this court," I said, and I looked at Sable beside me, and she met my eyes with the same directness she brought to everything, the same steadiness, and gave me a very small nod that said, "Go ahead, my fated mate." I showed them the mark on my own wrist. It had appeared on the march home. I had said nothing about it until now, and I showed them Sable's wrist beside mine, the matching gold impression that the bond had placed on both of us in the sanctum. The court went very quiet, not the hostile quiet of a court that disapproves. The particular quiet of a court that is looking at something it does not entirely know how to process yet. Veth stepped forward from the company. He had, I understood later, been thinking about this speech since the sanctum. She laid her hand on the relic when every warrior in the company had failed, he said, in the direct, unembellished voice of a man who does not make speeches often and means every word when he does. The relic woke, the curse broke, the mark appeared, we were all there. He paused. Every one of us. 43 men at my back, 43 witnesses. The court went quieter still, and then a different thing happened. Slowly, the way things happen when a large number of people reach the same understanding at the same time, they bowed. Not to me. They bowed to her. Sable stood very still beside me. I could feel not through the full bond, not yet, that would take time, but through the edges of it. The first threading of awareness that comes when two people's lives begin to knit together, that she was moved. Not undone. Moved. The difference mattered. It was the feeling of someone who has been quietly certain that the world is worth turning up for and has now been given evidence. "You don't have to look so surprised," I said to her very quietly for her alone. "I'm not surprised exactly," she said, equally quiet. She stopped. "I don't have a word for it." "I'll find you one," I said. "We have time." She looked at me. The corner of her mouth moved. "We do," she said. "I will tell you what the months after were like briefly, because they matter. The Winter's End was not instantaneous in its effects. A kingdom that has been cold for 11 years doesn't warm up overnight. The rivers needed several weeks to find their proper levels. The crops needed a full season before Varnath's farmers could trust the ground again. There were practical things. Rebuilding what the frost had taken, restocking what the bad harvests had depleted, persuading the wolves back into territories they had abandoned when the cursed gold made them uninhabitable. Sable was good at all of it. Not because she suddenly became something other than what she was always exactly what she was, but because what she was turned out to be more broadly useful than any of us had anticipated. She knew plants, which meant she knew soil, which meant the farmers trusted her in a way they did not always trust a king. She knew wounds, which meant the wolves accepted her in the way wolves accept people who have healed them. She had spent her whole life walking into places she wasn't invited and making herself useful, and now she did the same in a palace, in a court, in a kingdom still finding its footing after 11 years of cold. The court learned her. It took time. There were people who had expected the Alpha King's mate to be someone from the known great families, someone whose standing in the world was established before she arrived. They were not hostile, they were simply uncertain, which is a different thing and a solvable one. Sable solved it the way she solved everything, by showing up, by being steady, by doing the thing that needed doing rather than the thing that looked impressive. By midwinter, the first ordinary midwinter Varnath had had in 11 years, cold and clear and right, the court had stopped being uncertain. I have a memory from the night the first true snow fell, not winter snow, the light, ordinary kind, the kind children hold their hands out to catch. It fell on the capital with the quality of something that has been away for a long time and is coming home. Tentative at first, then committed, settling on the rooftops and the courtyard stones and the great bare trees along the palace walls. Sable was standing at the window of the hall that had become, quietly and without ceremony, the room she used most in the palace. She had a mug in her hands, and she was watching the snow come down. The wolves of the palace, there were 6 of them, and all 6 had decided sometime in the early autumn that this was their preferred room in the building, were arranged around the fire behind her. I came in and she did not turn. "It's different," she said. "The snow." "Yes." "Less," she tilted her head. "Less like it means something. More like it's just snow." "That's what it is," I said. Now she turned then. The firelight was behind her and the window light was in front and she was in between, and the mate mark on her wrist was a warm gold against her skin, familiar now, as settled as if it had always been there. "I was thinking," she said, "about what you said in the sanctum, about the door that knows it isn't yours." "Yes. I don't think the relic was the door," she said. "I think the relic was just the key." I looked at her for a long moment. She looked back, steady and direct, and a little bit amused at something I was going to have to ask her to explain. "What was the door?" I said. She set down the mug. She crossed the room. She stopped in front of me. "You," she said. "You've been a door with all the wrong people at it for 11 years. And then I walked in. The snow came down outside. The wolves breathed their slow rhythm by the fire. My chest had the feeling I had first noticed in the sanctum, the particular quality of something being recognized. Not the relic this time, just me, just this, the feeling of a man who has been alone and cold for too long and has been found. "You followed an army to a ruined sanctum," I said, "with no invitation." "I brought supplies," she said. "I'm practical. You are extraordinarily practical. And the wolves needed tending." "The wolves needed you," I said. "I needed you, the relic needed you, the kingdom needed you. It turns out you were carrying a great deal without knowing it." Something moved in her face, the thing I had learned by now to recognize, the feeling she did not have a word for, the moved but not undone thing, the world is worth turning up for thing. "So did you," she said quietly. 11 years of trying, that's a long time to keep walking at a door." "I'm stubborn," I said. "I know," she said. "I noticed that on the first day." I took her hand. The mate mark was warm under my thumb, the permanent gold of a thing that has found its right place. Outside, the snow fell on Varnith the way it was supposed to, light and ordinary, and meaning nothing beyond itself. Snow doing what snow does in a kingdom that has its seasons back. Inside, in a room full of sleeping wolves and firelight, my fated mate looked at me with her usual steadiness, and I understood something I had not understood before the march. That the thing I had been looking for was not the thing I had been looking for. That I had told myself I was marching toward the cure for Varnith, and Varnith was cured. But the cure and the quest and the 11 years had all been, in the end, the road to the back of a column where a woman with steady hands was tending the wounded and waiting, without knowing she was waiting, to walk through a door. She had always been the answer. The relic had simply known it first.